The following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Hello, and welcome back to Conversations with CASE, the Coalition of Agencies Serving the Elderly. CASE is an organization which has been around for about almost 40 years. In 2025, we'll be celebrating 40 years in existence. We are a community resource and education networking opportunity for those serving the elderly in the Niagara community. Members of CASE consists of various businesses, organizations, and agencies, all of which, as I said, work with individuals and the elderly in the community. Today, I'm very excited to welcome one of our CASE members. Actually, she is a past president and handed over the throne to me this year, so I'm very grateful for that. But I'd like to introduce Julie Whitbeck-Lewinski. Julie is the Doctor of Occupational Therapy. She is a license in occupational therapy, as well as the owner of CarePatrol. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me.
We're so glad that you were able to join us today. And I, as much as I've now been a part of CASE for a year, I'm still getting to know all the organizations and all the agencies. CarePatrol, I read and read up on it, but can you just let us know a little bit about CarePatrol, how it came about, and how you're involved?
Yeah, so CarePatrol is actually a national organization that was started in 1993 by a medical social worker in Arizona. And he was seeing the challenges that families were facing when their older loved ones were in the hospital. And maybe home wasn't as safe as what it had used to be. Seeing lots of readmissions of folks not getting the supports that they needed, getting placed into adult care facilities that maybe weren't exactly meeting their needs. And he knew that there was a better way to do it, and really helping people to take a person-centered approach to looking at how can we find the best care options for those individuals. So he started CarePatrol. CarePatrol now has over 200 offices throughout the United States. My husband, Don, and I own CarePatrol of Buffalo-Niagara, Rochester, Syracuse, as well as we're into the Pennsylvania area as well. At CarePatrol, we provide a service that is no cost to older adults and those that are supporting them, such as family members or care partners, their spouse, whatever that might be, to help them to navigate those complexities when more care is needed. It's a very challenging process to go through, to see, changes as you're aging. We all go through it on different levels. And really what we help to do is to connect people with in-home care options that really meet their needs. Or we look at helping them to navigate that next chapter of moving into senior living, such as independent living communities, assisted living communities, memory care communities, and nursing homes, if that's the level of care that's needed. Really focusing on trying to emphasize quality of life and meaning and purpose for the individuals as part of that, too.
Wow, that's a lot. That is definitely a lot of things that you do. But just take me back a little bit. Yeah. So you are an occupational therapist first, I would say. Yep. Why this changed? I mean, was it because you saw the need firsthand and dealing with it? Why? And having said that, are you still practicing? Are you able to still be an occupational therapist?
Those are great questions. First and foremost, to really take it back, I worked clinically in a variety of different settings as an occupational therapist, and I worked across the lifespan. So I worked from babies all the way through, end of life. I worked in acute hospital settings, subacute rehab, nursing homes, home health, a variety of different settings, and including things like in the acute hospital, transitional care units, geropsych units and such as well. So I always say that aging happens from the moment we're born.
True.
And I embraced that throughout my career, regardless of whether I was working with children, working with adults, working with older adults, that really what we set in place as we're young has a huge impact as we get older. And that really was my philosophy in regards to anybody that I was working with, is how can we provide meaning, purpose, wellness to individuals throughout that lifespan so that they're creating good outcomes throughout their lifetime. From that perspective, I worked with many families that were going through the challenges with an aging loved one. And I saw it from my bubble of an occupational therapist, working on that rehabilitative side of things, working with teams of social workers and case managers and other interdisciplinary team members. But still had, that siloed perspective as an occupational therapist from what we do. And taking that knowledge and that experience and then seeing some of my own family members go through challenges themselves. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. My grandfather had type 1 diabetes and dementia. My own father has mild cognitive impairment that's worsening. And really from that perspective, I see how challenging it is when it is your own loved one to navigate that space. So I saw that firsthand perspective personally as well. And then couple it with, career changes, moving. We lived in the Pittsburgh area for a decade and then returned back to the Western New York area where all of our family was from. And just really felt that I was on a journey to find something that I felt that I was having more impact and really helping more holistically. And that's when my husband and I came across CarePatrol. And funny story, we actually signed the paperwork to join the organization and start our own local offices March of 2020, right as COVID happened.
Oh my goodness.
And it was that conversation. We thought it was going to be that 2 weeks and that we'd flatten the curve and all of that aspect. And I was actually continuing to work full time in healthcare system here in Western New York at that time. And boy, it was, challenging to navigate that. But from that perspective, we started to see so many families reaching out to us during that time, with visitation being removed for adult care facilities and nursing homes and even in hospitals. So many people had just such a challenging time trying to navigate things and figure things out and trying to do what's best for their loved one, but still unsure that they're doing the right thing.
Right.
So we got very busy very fast and just started to grow exponentially from there, and expanded into the Rochester area and then the Syracuse area pretty quickly over the next following year as well. So it really, it has multi-components in regards to the whole transition into this. And I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. I'm sitting in this chair talking to you right now for a reason. And, really our goal is to just help as many people as we can. And do we have every answer? No. And we're working within a system that we have to work within. Can't create options that don't exist. So we're trying to really help people to navigate finding that best care for what they need. The right care at the right time at the right place.
Well, I have to say, so many of us see things that we wish were better, or we see things that are needed and changes that need to happen. And it's really very refreshing to hear from someone who saw that and was able to change and hopefully make a difference and make an even more of an impact, because I'm sure you made an impact on the clinical side. But I think that is just amazing what you're able to do.
And to go back to, you asked me, am I still practicing as an occupational therapist? And I'm not.
You're not.
However, all of those skills, from really looking at how to assess an individual's needs and understand their functional level, to really look at, occupational therapy is very holistic. So it is very person-centered. And it is really looking at that meaning and that quality of life and how do we fit those pieces together. So I'm using all of those skills on a regular basis. I'm also a dementia care specialist. As I mentioned, I have my own family history and background with that. So that's something that is just important to me on so many levels, both professionally and personally. So really infusing my knowledge and understanding from that perspective to help to support families and caregivers that are going through the challenges of those horrible diseases that fall under that dementia umbrella. Working with local organizations like the Alzheimer's Association to help to heighten awareness and understanding, helping to reduce stigma. All of those things are super important to me from what we do as well. And finding the right care for those individuals is very important too, from looking at in-home and aging in place and how can they do that. But also then, if we are looking at adult care facilities, what is going to be the right match for that person as well? Because just because your mom's friend went to a certain place doesn't mean that that's going to be the right care or the right match for your own loved one. And I always say, people go to real estate agents so that they can find that right home. You make the list of what are the things that are important, what do I need, what do I want, what geographic location do I want. Those are all the similar things that we do from that care perspective of looking at that person and what their needs are now, but also into the future. So it's important from that perspective. I'm a fall prevention specialist as well, too. Lots of older adults are impacted by falls, and, a fall happens every 8 seconds. And, with that, really trying to educate people how they can reduce the risk of falling, but also to help families to connect to resources. What do you do if there is a fall? We get lots of crisis calls and, hospitalizations from those sorts of things. And sometimes the falls precipitate other things, but sometimes it's other things that precipitate the falls, like medication errors or missing medications or, a change in their acute health status, like a cold or COVID that does things of that nature. So we really try to look at each person individually and holistically to meet their needs.
I've actually been to a few presentations with fall prevention when I worked at a local hospital, and myself didn't realize, like, you just your environment, just things, carpets and things like that, talking about falls. But interesting you brought it up. I have an older sister who belongs to one of the Ys, and there was going to be a fall prevention, and she has a few conditions that she's dealing with, and she was so excited to go. And I said, Mary, you're going to be so surprised at the things that you're going to learn that are simple things that you can do in your home. So that's just a side note on the falls.
I mean, there's all like environmental things from lighting to looking like the carpeting, the flooring, looking at where you actually place items that you use on a regular basis. Should you be placing your coffee pot down in a lower cabinet when it's something that you use every day and you have to bend down and get it out? So really thinking about how you can set your environment up for success can make a huge difference. But then there's, like I said, the medication side of things. There's certain medications that increase your risk of falls. And a lot of people don't recognize that. Then there's the medications, that like water pills that make you have to use the bathroom more frequently,
Right.
and that increases your risk. To then just looking at as we age, our muscle mass decreases. So what can we be doing in regards to our diet with increasing our protein and, looking at how we can hydrate ourselves better so it reduces our risk. So many different facets, and they're small changes.
And it is amazing. And on that note, also, I was listening to a local radio station, and the topic was, what have you changed in your diet that has helped you in various ways, whether it was weight or diabetes or mobility? And it was really interesting. I mean, I'm someone who tries to practice what I preach. I do go to the gym every day and, try and lift heavier and heavier, but you still learn something every day. It is so important. I like to throw the age card in. Well, I am this old. And, the owner of the gym says it really doesn't matter if you take care of yourself and do the right things that you're supposed to do. So CarePatrol, we know what it is. There are other organizations that certainly do the same thing. What makes you different, and how do you find all of those many resources that you will then in turn use to help the people that you care for, that you take care of?
There are others that do things that are similar to us. We really specialize at looking at what are those in-home care options that are going to match people's needs, and what transitions of care to higher levels of care, like the adult care facilities. That's our main focus. So we live and breathe that on a daily basis, 24 hours, 7 days a week. We take calls after hours on weekends to help to support people. And I really think, because we specialize in that, we have incredibly strong insight into all of the senior care communities and the regions that we serve. We're in them all the time. We're touring with families. So we know, how does their staffing look? Are they employees, or are they staffing agencies? Do we see the same people on a regular basis? We know the things to look for. We know the environmental design and setup. We know how their activities are set up, and we see what's actually going on when we're in there and touring with them. We even sometimes provide in-services for different care facilities, so we get to actually interact with the staff and see the quality and the level and their understanding and how they are being trained. So we have all of those insights, but we're also serving families that go to these facilities and staying in touch with them, finding out how things are going. So we get really great feedback, good and bad, that help us to really educate people on what options might be best when it comes to that aspect. And I go back to saying, just because something works for one person doesn't mean that it's going to work for the next. And sometimes people find themselves in the wrong situation as well, too. So, we can use our expert knowledge in that to really find what is going to be the better match. With the in-home care services, it's looking at working with quality organizations and agencies that train their staff, that have good communication systems that are in place to communicate with the families and the care partners and such. So we really keep our finger on that pulse within the community with working with those organizations. But we also know that because we specialize mainly in that people need other resources too. That might not be what they need at this moment. Maybe they're looking for adult day programs, or they're just looking for housekeeping type of service, or maybe they're looking for transportation, or maybe they have questions about their Medicare plan. So we know that people have all of those other types of needs and questions as well, too. And really that's where organizations like CASE come into play in regards to us networking with other organizations, agencies, individuals that are out there supporting the aging population. If it's not something that we directly do, how can we connect them with those right resources to support them at that point in time? So CASE is a great resource. We're in other networking groups groups. And really, it's about just trying to know what's available in the community and stay on top of it. It's ever changing, too.
For sure.
So we don't ever purport that we know everything, but we're going to try to point people in a direction that helps to support them, regardless of if it's what we specialize in or if we need to get others involved as part of that.
I think that's so important, though, in organizations such as yours, because there are tons and tons of resources. And I'm somewhat new to the elderly population, working with the elderly population, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, but it is amazing to me, the resources out there. But as you said, who knows where to start, you
It's
know?
complex, it's confusing, it's overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
And I find so many families, because of how overwhelming it is, that they don't make the call.
Absolutely.
They get frozen and they don't get what they need when they need it. And then crisis situations arise. And then we're getting those calls as well, too. But another thing that really sets our team aside is the experience and background. We really work collaboratively as a team. So my husband is an attorney, and he can really help people in regards to looking at the state planning side of things, understanding what documentation, legal documentation and such is important to have in place, and when and why. He's very good at helping our clients understand their long-term care insurance policies, when and how to engage them. He is really knowledgeable in VA benefits as well, too. And so are a couple of other folks on our team. So we all have little niches on our team, and we work together to help to support all of our clients. We have employees that have social work background, have worked in adult care facilities, nursing. I myself, the clinical side of occupational therapy and case management. So we really bring all of that together, along with our knowledge of what's available in the community, to really work hard to help to support what people need and when they need it.
What they need. I would think, being a national organization, there are certain guidelines that you have to live by, but you can tell just from speaking to you, and I think anyone, I would hope any one of us who works with people in general, but the elderly, there is a personal component to that, a compassionate component to that, and you really have to have it. And I think, asking you what makes you stand apart, I can't say that you stand apart from A, B, or C, but I can say who you are and what you represent as far as caring about the people for whom you're caring. I mean, I think it definitely goes a long way. My parents are gone, but I have a large family. I have a lot of sisters, and I'm the second youngest. So those times will come too, and I just want to make sure that they know, and I'm hopefully able to direct them that way. I was at a luncheon the other day, and I ran into some old colleagues of mine who are starting to look at those options. And from my standpoint, it's great to be able to know about these resources and be able to share some of these things with people. And again, bringing it back to CASE, as we always like to, that is the place to get those resources. I mean, from working with the insurances to the legal pieces to the in-home care, whatever it might be. Having said that, though, how do people find out about you?
In so many different ways. So, that's a loaded question. We do work with and collaborate with a lot of healthcare providers in the community. So, doctors' offices, specialists, hospital systems, nursing homes. From that perspective, those healthcare providers help to connect people to us when they need something more. So we get a lot of calls from folks that are referred from that perspective. Past clients are a huge one. When we're able to really help somebody, I think it's such, like I said, an overwhelming system, and it's complex to go through, that so many of our clients are so appreciative of having that advocate and that support to go along with it, that they spread the word. So we have a lot of folks that either come back with additional family members that they need more support with, in-laws that they need support with, friends, colleagues that they refer to us. So we have that perspective as well. From things like just general, advertising, people find out about us from that perspective. So it's kind of a mix, and obviously we're always trying to create more awareness of who we are in the community and what we do. We oftentimes, and this is a little bit funny, we oftentimes get your Care Patrol like Paw Patrol?
Well, I must say.
We get that all the time, and people refer to us as the Paw Patrol girls. And actually, a funny story, during the height of COVID, we actually, when everything, all of the buildings were shut down, the hospitals, the nursing homes, all of that, we went around doing trunk or treats in parking lots, and we dressed up as Paw Patrol characters. So I always tell people, I don't care how you remember me, how you remember Care Patrol, just remember us.
Yeah,
so if it's by Paw Patrol that you do, that's great.
That's a beautiful thing.
So we had that perspective going for us for a while.
Goodness. I love it.
Yeah.
I must say, I did kind of think that when I first heard the word, so I can say that now.
My kids actually came up with a jingle for Care Patrol using the song from Paw Patrol. So
I love it. So it's family run. And is that you and your husband? Is there more family involved? And how big is your team?
So it's me and my husband that are the owners family-wide. But I do have to say that I mentioned my children. My children do get involved.
That's wonderful.
There's been many vendor fairs, health fairs and such that we've gone on. My daughter is especially keen. She's 7 years old, and she's very interested in what we do.
That's beautiful.
So she's been at those vendor fairs, and she's the one that's calling people over and giving them our tchotchkes and and making them enter into our raffles or whatever that might be. It's a good marketing ploy. They all love her.
I love it.
So there's that aspect. And then, I really, I have always tried to create awareness for my own children in regards to, people having different needs, differences, embracing that, understanding diversity and inclusion and all of that aspect. So I'm always educating them on that. And actually years back when I lived in Pittsburgh, I worked for the Western Pennsylvania School for Blind Children. And they had an integrated child care center there. So my kids actually went there, and they were integrated with children that had other disabilities and really embraced that. When we returned to Western New York, it was similar in that I had my children in a daycare that was an inclusive daycare as well. And, my daughter's best friend had limb deformities. And she completely didn't ever see that or even bring it up. So I really try to always involve them from that perspective. And hopefully as they get older, they'll be more interested in doing more with us. They're always at the Alzheimer's, Walk to End Alzheimer's walks with us, really enjoy that perspective and really have that great understanding of, diversity and inclusion and changing care needs and all of that aspect. So I think it's, wonderful from a family-owned business perspective of that. Our team, you asked, it's a small but mighty team. So we're generally around 8 employees across our offices.
All of the offices? Wow.
Yeah. So when we look at what we actually do, it really starts with what we call a care discovery. And that care discovery can happen in so many different ways. People are always asking, well, what does it look like to work with you? It looks different for every single person that we're working with. You know, it could be a crisis call that somebody's loved one is in the hospital, and it might be us talking on the phone initially. It might be us then going out to do a bedside visit in the hospital. It might be us meeting in a coffee shop with several siblings concerned about their aging loved one and starting the conversation that way. And, you know, sometimes it's really extensive. I have a story that an actual client that I worked with that was living alone during COVID, because she's still alive, still well, has dementia, and her son was her only family member, and he lived in California. And if you recall, during COVID, there was the travel bans.
Sure.
So he wasn't able to come back here, but he noticed that when he was calling his mom on a daily basis that things didn't seem right. So from that perspective, it was a whole different care discovery and relationship developing. It was me going to her house, knocking on the door, introducing myself as her son's friend to just check in on her. And doing that on a regular, you know, every other day basis to establish a rapport enough that she finally let me in her home.
Wow.
And really working with her, I mean, it was getting her into a neurologist and taking her to the appointment and, you know, helping her to get on the right prescriptions and have the correct diagnosis. And she was driving. And at one point in time, she got in the car to drive home and ended up lost in Warsaw, New York.
Yeah.
And the police called me because I was the last phone number in her cell phone. So, you know, there's these types of stories too. You know, sometimes it's a whole lot of interaction with us. Sometimes it's a very quick care discovery and we're able to get things in place and we're just following up to make sure everything's going okay. So it looks very different for every person, but it really starts with that care discovery of understanding that person, what their care needs are, what their wishes are, their social history and background, how they're getting around, all of those pieces that are super important, in the financial side too.
Sure.
Because that's super important to understanding what options to direct people to.
Sure. And I actually was going to bring that up. So obviously if they say they have A or they have B, then you will direct them in that.
Yes. Yeah, we have to look at options that will actually work based on their care needs, but also their financial situation, you know, connecting them to services, you know, if they have low income, you know, can they qualify for Medicaid? Can they qualify for VA aid and attendance? All of those things that we try to look at. And we also really try to educate people, you know, okay, this is what it could look like now, but how is that going to impact things in the future as well? So constant education process.
Sure. Do you often or sometimes get pushback from people? You know, you meet with someone, you know what the options are, but they really want this option or they don't see that. Or when they get to you, are they kind of at that point where I just need help and let me know what I need to do because I trust you?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, our goal is to educate people to help them to make the decision that they feel is best for them. So there are times that we're helping people to get, you know, option A in place when we really know that option B is likely the better option for them. But we have to meet people where they're at.
Sure.
And that's why it's so important for us to continue to follow up with them, because if something does change, we're there as a safety net to help to catch them.
Absolutely. And, you know, I too, you know, I know you know that I work for a referral service and we're the same way. You know, we want to follow up. We always follow up with our families and with our aides. And it's so, so important. I can't say that enough. And I can't say that enough about this industry. It's people. and you are caring for people that you'll be one day, people that you have in your life. And you really have to stay in touch. It's not just about a transaction.
Yeah.
It's about compassion and all of that. So
Yeah.
I certainly admire and thank you for what Care Patrol does. But if you could say anything that you wanted to people perhaps interested, not knowing, what would you say to them, and how that you can help them?
I would say don't wait for a crisis situation to happen. Even if it's not something that you feel like you need right now, educate yourself and arm yourself now. There's no obligation to have us connect the dots for you. But at least reach out and understand what options are available. If you have a chronic health condition, what might that mean over time? And what are things that might be important for you to consider, both from its long-term care planning is basically what you're looking at from that perspective. We have a lot of people that come to us in crisis situations that say, I wish I would have known that so many years ago.
Sure.
I didn't set myself up right. Even from the simplest thing of, when an individual has some sort of a dementia diagnosis, like one of the most important things is to make sure that you have healthcare proxy, powers of attorney, most forms completed, so that at the point where that individual may no longer have capacity to make their own decisions, that those things are in place. Otherwise, it can put you in a really dire position of having to look at guardianship. Sure. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. So just being educated and having that information is so important. So yes, you can call us for long-term care planning. And, again, it's not an obligation to have any sort of services in place right now, but have an understanding of the things that you should know about. And all the way to those crisis situations. Sure. And if you end up in the hospital, or, a loved one has an acute medical event or a stroke and they need more care, we can help during those times too. Pick up the phone and call us, 716-463-2966. And we're sure to help in any of those regards. Our service is of no cost. We're kind of that navigator to help. Obviously, there are things that we connect people with that have costs to them. But again, we're really looking at financially and what benefit programs and such, and other ways that people might be able to pay for their care as well too, as part of that process.
One last question. Is it ever too soon to call you?
No, it's never too soon.
Okay.
So there's always resources that we can help to connect people with, and even sometimes it's just the wellness side of things. And not needing care needs. So we're happy to, and that's where, CASE comes into play with connecting with, great organizations like different senior centers and different senior groups. And there's all sorts of stuff out there, different therapy practices that have wellness programs. There's a lot that we can help to connect people with that isn't necessarily that in-home care or transitioning to senior care facilities. So,
well, I, for one, think it's wonderful. I like the one-stop shop, so I'm all about that. Like if I could have a chef, make all my meals. So I think that's a wonderful thing. So, Julie, I want to thank you for being our guest today at Conversations with Case. And thank you for tuning in, hearing from Julie Lewinski from Care Patrol. And until next week, I'm Christina O'Hara from Case Niagara at www.caseniagara.com. Thank you.